So we've already threaded the machine. I'm going to put a bobbin in. Top thread should match the bottom thread. That way it's the same amount of stretchiness in the thread. You always want to look right here and make sure that you've clicked in to the little notch that is on the side here. You make sure that's horizontal. If it's down here, you're going to break the needle. Have all kinds of problems. Alright, so now that we've checked that, you check it every single time that you put in a new bobbin. That way you won't be surprised. I'm going to thread this. There we go. I'm going to put the thread underneath the foot. Okay, so now I've got a little swatch of material. I've got some cheap material on top. I've got some pretty good batting. It's not the best in the world. I like it thicker. The reason why you want a good batting is so that there's somewhere for the knot to live. If you just have real thin batting, sometimes the knot will be on top and sometimes it'll be on the bottom and your stitching won't look very good. So I'm just going to do a needle up. Then I'm going to grab the thread and pull it to the side. That will pull up the bottom thread. So there we go. We've got one thread from the top and one from the bottom. So I can pull on this bottom one and it pulls really nice and smooth. So that's how you check its tension. Up here you grab right here and pull on this. It's nice and smooth. And you'll notice that the top tension is always a lot heavier than the bottom. And of course that makes sense because you're pulling the thread back up to the top using this take-up lever. This lever is just like your arm when you were sewing by hand. You're pulling the thread up with your arm, and that's what this take-up lever is. It's a mechanical arm. Okay, now I'm going to put the machine into a manual stitch mode. That's covered in the manual. And I'm just going to start sewing. Because I don't have the stitch regulator running, and because I don't have it on a frame, I have to move the material. And I have to keep it moving. So here we go. And now I'm going to look at them and see how they look. So take a look at those stitches. You want to zoom in there. You can see that they go down into the yellow. And now we'll look on the bottom side. And we can see that they look beautiful. The bottom is a nice loop and the knot is in the middle of the quilt. Okay, so that's stitching pretty nice. So I'm going to stitch some faster speeds. This will thrill you. Here we go. I have to keep it moving or it'll tie a thread lock. I can go faster. So that's manual sewing without stitch regulator. You can see the stitches look really good. And then on this side, wow, they look really good too. So that means our tension on the bottom is balanced to the tension on top. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to use the tension knob. You'll notice that the number 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and some lines are on there. And they mean absolutely nothing. The only purpose of those numbers is so you can remember the position the knob was in. Imagine if there was no numbers on there, you would have no idea where the knob was last time. So look at this like a clock face. 12 o'clock is at the top, 6 o'clock is at the bottom, 3 o'clock's over here, and 9 o'clock's over here. If you turn that 4, which just happens to be at the top, to the 3 o'clock position, now you've tightened it a quarter turn. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If I tighten the tension from this perfect tension that we have, it's going to pull the thread up from the bobbin. It's going to start pulling it up, and we'll start getting it too far to the top. So I want to make it do that so you can see what that does. So I tightened it a quarter turn. Now I'm going to go another quarter turn. It's at the 6 o'clock. Now I'm going to go another quarter turn. It's at the 9 o'clock. So I tightened it 3/4 turns. So I'm going to go all the way back up to the top. Now I've tightened it 1 whole turn. I hope that makes sense. Now let's see what the stitches look like. I'm going to slow it down because we were going full speed before. Here goes. Okay, I want you to see this. See what's happening right here at this turn? You can see little eyelashes. It looks like a lady with mascara in her eyelashes. Do you see those? That is because the tension is too tight on the top. See, the top thread is just laying on top of the quilt. And these eyelashes are coming from the bottom part of the quilt. So if you look at the bottom, oh, it's perfect. It's absolutely beautiful. And that's because the bottom thread is being pulled clear up to the top too much. So it's too tight. And we know that it's too tight by 1 turn because we had it perfect before. Remember right here? We righty-tighted till 4 was all the way to the top. Now let's go lefty loose all the way till 4 is at the top. And then let's do it again. So now it'll be too loose. I'm going to flip these discs just to make sure that that thread is in them, in the discs. Okay, so now we're going to sew and see what happens. So we sewed with it to see what happens after we loosened it 1 whole turn. And see, it looks beautiful on the top. But guess what? The bottom looks bad now. See that? See all those eyelashes? The eyelashes are now on the bottom. And so what do we have to do to fix it? We have to pull the thread up to the middle of the quilt. So righty-tighty. And because we know that 1 whole turn is what we've been playing with, we go 1 whole turn. But if you don't know, go 1/4 of a turn at a time so that you can sneak up on the right tension. You got to be patient. You got to do this on the side of your quilt so that you can actually test on your quilt. So always add extra material to your quilt for this kind of testing. You'll have to adjust tension every time you change types of thread. And then if you live where there's a lot of humidity, you'll find that the tension changes in the morning and in the afternoon because of the thread absorbing the humidity in the air. So it's better to test and check your tension than to sew your whole quilt and then find that you've got to pick out a lot of threads. Okay, so we've put it back where it should be, and I'm going to sew with it again and see if it fixed it. And I see that it's a little bit tight, so I'm going to loosen it a little bit. So look, don't be upset that we're no longer 4 on top. We're so close that I'm now doing less than 1/4 turn. All right, so now it's stitching good now. So now I'm going to do some things that show you what can happen when things go wrong. We have this thread guide in here so that it keeps the thread away from this check spring, which is moving. But without that, sometimes you'll get hooked right here on your check spring. So watch what happens when that thread gets hooked on the check spring. It makes the tension tighter and it messes up. It pulls up to the top. See that? We basically got a knot there. We can fix it by pulling that away. All right, now let me show you something else. When you have no tension on the top, let's say we threaded it wrong and we skipped our tension right there, we can see what happens to your sewing. Terrible things. See that? All this horrible thread on the bottom. And that is a sure sign that says you have no tension on the top. And yep, see that? There was no tension on the top. Sounded terrible. Alright, so there, I've put the tension back on. I'm going to have to be careful and clear and make sure there's no extra thread. And there is. Because there was no tension, there was all kinds of thread being placed down by the bobbin by the needle. Yeah, so I'm going to unthread this. See, it even had trouble on the bobbin. So I'm going to get all that extra thread off. So this is just to show you what can go wrong if you thread it wrong. I'm going to pull off some of that bad thread. Put it back in. Excuse me. Okay, so you see how terrible that was sewing. It's not the machine's fault. We had the tension set wrong. We had no tension on top. All right, so this is the same on all quilting machines. You have to adjust tension both bottom and top. It's not like a sewing machine where they can do that almost automatically. So let's see if it sews now. Okay, so it's back to being good. But see, we had a lot of garbage thread there caused by bad tension. All right, so that's the rules of tension. This tension knob pulls the thread to the top. The tension down here on the bobbin pulls it down to the bottom. And it's a tug-of-war between those two. Same on every single quilting machine, no matter what you pay.